Welcome back to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Zina and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. With us today is Godfred Mbanasong Zina. He's an international relations analyst, protocol officer, and junior associate at DevSec Analytics Africa Limited, as well as a freelance journalist based in Ghana. And today we'll be discussing the latest developments on the security and geopolitical front in West Africa. Three key topics held together by the same common theme of security: the spread of the JNIM movement throughout West Africa, the US-Russia competition in the region, and Washington's quest for access to critical minerals and rare earths, possibly in exchange for economic and military support to some of the West African countries, including those who are now led by Russia-backed juntas. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we start with the heart of the discussion, if you could just give us a couple of words about yourself and your work as a background.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thanks for inviting me to contribute to this important topic and subject, especially with regards to issues of security and on the African continent, with more focus on West Africa and then the Sahel region. I think you have mentioned very clearly about my background. Yes, I'm currently with DevSec Analytics Africa and also a freelance journalist. And I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you so much. So here is my first question, just to kick off things. How has Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, or JNIM, a well-known Al-Qaeda affiliate, evolved in its operational tactics over the past year? And what are the main drivers behind this escalation in the Sahel?
Yeah, thank you very much. Even before I move straight to the main drivers of the JNIM and other Islamic actors in the Sahel region, the security situation in West African Sahel is increasingly alarming in recent times, particularly with countries such as Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad, where terrorist activities are killing a lot. In fact, about 12,000 people were killed as of last year, and more than 3 million people were killed. And then this growing instability is very concerning. And JNIM has been regarded by the Global Terrorism Index as one of the most dangerous terrorist groups in the world, where they are even now expanding from the north and now heading towards the south of the southern part of West Africa. I'm talking about the coastal sector. And it is very, very, very concerning, especially looking at how these countries are linked and how they relate, and then the key issues or key influences. And one major influences of these groups and how they gain ground in West Africa is due to the porous borders, which is a key factor in terms of that. Another most important point that we could also talk about is the weaponizations of small arms by individuals, in fact, civilians in West Africa. According to reports, West Africa currently has a lot of small arms and weapons in the hands of ordinary people, civilians, and much of it, about 11% of these arms, are in the hands of terrorist groups, which is quite alarming. And these factors, coupled with other factors such as the economic concerns in various countries, where countries are struggling economically to be able to provide jobs for young people and individuals who are living. And JNIM and other Islamist groups are able to penetrate to various countries using these systems. And this impact is currently alarming, and stakeholders need to take action.
This is indeed a very alarming chain of events. And what's more, it seems that these organizations, GNIM and the others, are expanding beyond Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger into coastal states like Benin and Togo. How does that alter the strategic landscape of West Africa?
Yes, that actually is very worrying in terms of the landscape of West Africa. You know, I made mention about the porous borders and how countries are interlinked. When you come to West Africa, we have a community in a particular border that speaks a particular language that also has a replicate in another country. For instance, when you go to the Volta region of Ghana, we have the Evers there. And when you cross to the other side of Togo, we have same. And when you go to the northern sector around Boku Navrongo, we had the Moses over there in the Boku side. We also have similar in Burkina Faso. We have the Kassinas, you know, in the upper east also, the Navrongo area, the Paga, and we also have similar languages in Burkina Faso. And these are intertwined because someone can be living in Ghana and the person is able to move across to Burkina Faso to go to farm. And someone is also in Ghana and he moves to uh, um Togo or La Cote d'Ivoire to go and then shop, go for markets, or go to visit a relatives. And these are quite intertwined. And this is not only between Ghana, and it also expands through to the border between Mali and Burkina Faso, the same thing as Niger and Benin. And that is very troubling. And it has been pushing and facilitating the movement of these groups towards the landscape. And it is very complex because stakeholders need to be much more in-depth before they could be able to thwart this Janim and other Islamist group in these areas.
And what are the regional impacts of high casualty attacks, such as the July 29th assault in Burkina Faso, which killed approximately 50 soldiers?
Can you please repeat your question?
Sure. What are the regional impacts of high casualty mass attacks, such as the July 29th assault in Burkina Faso, which killed approximately 50 soldiers?
Yes, it's very it impacts a lot um, concerns to the groups and then and the happenings in Burkina Faso where the soldiers killed where the attackers killed about 50 soldiers. And you know the main threat today from the Jenim group and then other Islamic actors has the expand towards the south, you know,
Mhm.
especially in northern Benin and in Togo, and even to the extent in southwestern Niger. You know, the July attack in Burkina Faso is very, very worrying because currently the militants are now focusing on and the military instead of the civilians. So these
Mhm.
militants of about 100 militant groups, you know, they basically now target the military, you know, we that are there to support in terms of maintaining peace in these areas. So it's very concerning because looking at the rate in which and these groups are advancing, and then the kind of security situations that is, you know, initially the juntas decided to take over power from democratically elected leaders. One of their main reasons was due to the alarming security situation that were happening in the region at the time before they came to power. And they have been looking for ways in which they can be able to find a solutions to this. And they have been doing a lot of partnership with other external actors, including the Russian African Corps, and also the Chinese have also been providing them with equipment to also help in tackling this. And because of this effort that they are doing and the newness of Russian in the terrain of the Sahel in battling this jihadist group, the militants are able to penetrate and loot, and now they are looking at attacking these soldiers and also coming up for the government officials instead of civilians. And this most of the time also have impact on civilians as well, because in some instances they do kill civilians in these areas as well. So the situation and then the attack that happened is very, very alarming, and it's very, very, very much concerning the security of West Africa.
So would you say that because they're targeting the military more than the civilians, they're getting more public support and less resistance?
Not necessarily. The history of this jihadist group based background comes from various religious groups, anti-sentiment, anti-Western educational systems, and these ideologies have been there over the period. And as they move on, they also try to take advantages of various gaps that exist in terms of governance, control, especially in the northern Mali areas, and also in northern Burkina Faso, and also in other parts of Niger that is closer to the Libyan area. So as they expand towards all those areas, and these ideologies are also changing, because it is a very complex matter where and these militant try to adapt, adjust, and also find other ways and means to fund their activities. Funding is very much more important for them, as they even sometimes do block roads to collect taxes to enable them to run their programs. And also they do attacks individuals and then kidnap people for ransoms to enable them finance their operations. So these issues are much more concerning, if I can put it that way, because they are becoming much more complex compared to the initial ideology. So now ideologies are expanding beyond that, but they now come with their own agendas, and even sometimes politicians even use them as it is being purported on the media to also be able to achieve their aims. And after they have used them and they're unable to meet these their demands, then it becomes very difficult for them to control these people.
How many, would you say, active operatives are now involved in these movements overall throughout West Africa, approximately?
Based on the very complex nature of their operations and the breakaways that do happen in terms of these groups, there are several groups, but the most of them that conduct deadly attacks has been the Jenim, the Islamic attacks. We also have the Boko Haram groups as well, and other emerging ones who are also currently developing and also on the stage, who also comes up from time to time. But most of the deadly attacks that have been happening has always been from the Jenim, and then the Boko Haram, and then other Islamist groups as well in these areas.
But how many people would you say are involved in total in all of these movements? Without necessarily separating each, but how many would you say are involved in some form of jihadist activity?
In terms of the total number, is not currently, but in terms of their impact, these people work in groups. For instance, the attack that happened in Mali in recent times, about 100 militants went out to attack these groups, and they operate with intelligence and other team members that are also somewhere else, giving them the hint as to how they should operate effectively. So in terms of the numbers and then the impact, that is much more significant. For instance, more than 12,000 people have been killed by these militants, over the years. And a lot of people, over 3 million people, have been displaced in these areas to find for greener pastures in other areas, to live, because of these impacts on how these terrorist groups operate. And another key issue has also been the recruitment process. Has these militant groups also find ways to get young people, even sometimes children, and train them, abduct some, and also sometimes entice, due to the unemployment rate within the region. They try to entice other young people and young individuals to join them for a much more good salary as well. So they also use other means to also get more people to join the group.
How many would you say there is of fighters at the moment overall? I don't need a breakdown by each movement, but how many are involved in some form of fighting?
Yes, for the exact number of people of the terrorist groups fighting is not clearly known, and I will not be able to confirm this for now. Yes, I think I'll have to check that.
Given Janine's adaptability, what security vulnerabilities would you say are being exploited the most by them during the assaults on military bases and also civilian populations? What are the problems that they're able to latch on to be able to succeed?
Can you repeat the question?
Basically, given Janine's adaptability, what are the security problems that they are exploiting in order to succeed in their attacks?
Yes, so it's a combination of factors that they use in terms of navigating their way through. Just like I made mention about the unemployment in the country, but also another key issue is the ousting of Western partners. Western partners has been in the field, or has been in West Africa for some time now, and yes, they've been in West Africa for some time. Particularly, they started back in 2002, where the United Nations, or the United States, sorry, the United States launched its Pan Sahel initiative back in 2002, which later grew into a broader counterterrorism partnership across the region. And then France was also here in the Sahel, due to their colonial relationship with these three countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And in Mali in 2013 with Operation Seva, which also later expanded into Operation Bakahene, with thousands of troops also deployed in Mali, Niger, and then Chad at the time, to help in combating the terrorist groups. And then also the United Nations mission and then the EU missions also had earlier initially joined in the fight with other peacemakers and also other forces to enable them fight this. But due to the complex nature, these groups, these Western partners could not be able to bring down win the war against these Islamist groups in the country, to how the ordinary people would have preferred them to be able to manage the situation based on their capability, and then how they intended to gain grounds. And so, as they have been ousted out of these regions and bringing in Russia, which has been a new partner in the field, but also doesn't know exactly what the terrain has been. it is giving much more space for Islamist group to also take advantage of this sector to also explore and then be able to move to other areas as well.
So what exactly is the Russia came in claiming that they would lend military and security support to the governments that basically overthrew the pro-Western governments. Why have they not been successful at doing that? Why is it that the law enforcement, the military, remain so susceptible to attacks?
Yes. As I made mention about the newness of their terrain, that is one.
Mm-hmm,
And also another thing has also been that the Russian has also been more focused on regime protection
mm-hmm,
in terms of protecting the various governments that brought them. Just last week, and the Russia on the last month, Russia signed an agreement with Togo, and in terms of providing security and then some weapons to the Togolese government, because Russia has been quite good in terms of protecting regimes, and we know that Togo's president decided to amend the constitution to now become the key president for life. In fact, if we can put it that way, while we now have a different person who now runs the role of the prime minister, but it is been changed over time, which means that the Nyashingbe would be able to protect their dynasty by ruling forever in Togo, because the leader is not going to be subjected to any election and he is automatically the president. So they are now signing in some new agreement with the Russian for these regime protections. And that being said, is similar in Mali, Burkina Faso, and also in Niger, where we have a lot. In fact, Mali is being classified as one of the top three good producers in West Africa or the world. And because of these minerals as well, Russia has been focused on also tapping into the minerals, the gold, and then the uranium that are being mined in these countries. So they are focused on protecting and also exploiting on these minerals rather than the overall protection of the civilians. So the focus hasn't been complete, despite they having other mercenaries, member or private security personnel in other sections of the bloc. They have been so much focused in terms of protecting various regimes in the Sahel.
Now, it's been some time since Wagner has basically been incorporated into the Africa Corps. In the beginning, it was a transitional stage. Now, some time has passed. Is there any difference between how Africa Corps operates from the way Wagner operated?
Um, there hasn't been any new. Basically, the few changes has been made in terms of the individuals, because some of the Wagner groups were reported to have been taken back to Ukraine to go help or assist the Russians in that combat, and other new members also came to join the rest of the Wagner groups with this some few changes made to that team, and then the renaming and operations has largely been the same.
Mhm.
The Russian African Corps operations is very much more similar compared to that of the role that the Wagner was playing in on the continent before the name was changed. So basically, their operations has largely been the same over the period.
So the fact that that the Russians are propping up these regimes, has that impacted the legitimacy of these governments in within the people? Has there been a change in popular support since they took power?
There hasn't been, largely because anti-West sentiment has been dominating, and
Hmm.
Russia has been making very good use of information, of fake news, and also based on the alignment and current geopolitical trends that are transforming. So basically, Russia is currently still enjoying its influence on the continent, and largely despite some few people who are not so much content because of the operations of the African core on the continent due to some issues of human rights issues, human rights violations
Mhm.
has been asked due to their operations and how they attack even ordinary citizens. And so there hasn't been much different, just to say.
Would the deepening of Russian military cooperation agreements, such as the new pact with Togo, which was signed in July, fundamentally reshape the regional security architecture, or do you think it will not have a very big impact?
Yeah, for instance, for the case of Togo, there's already a lot of sentiment and also um, a lot of unrest in
Mhm.
Togo, where a lot of youth and also civil society and then oppositions have been demonstrating over the period to for the president not to change the constitution. But we also the violence and also how things panned up, last month when these issues was dominating the media space, and so for now Russia's impact over there hasn't been, because Togo has even been considering joining the alliance of Sahel states, and for some time now, which we know that these countries are very much more in strong solidarity with Russia, as they have visited Russia and St. Petersburg over time and had some engagement with even the foreign minister of Russia to try and then seek more cooperation, coordination, and also some support and legitimacy and from the Wagners. So for now, the Russia largely seems to be enjoying from the gap that the West left in West Africa and also in the Sahel region.
How would you compare, Russia's support for these, regimes to China's and France's strategies for influence in the region? Obviously, France has been failing, but nevertheless, I don't think they've completely given up.
Yes, just some last month there was this report that France has left the issues or the security issues of Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso in the Sahel areas to their own fate for them to be able to manage, and they do
Mhm.
not have concern. But largely, France still have a lot of interest in terms of uh, and the operations of what is happening in these areas, largely, if not for security, economically, based on the common currency that this country shares,
Mhm.
which are being deposited in the banks of France. So these countries have hinted of changing their currency from the franc CFA. However, they haven't changed it yet, and France continue to cooperate with them at that level. However, France has moved in terms of security wise to other areas, and they have moved most of their security back home, and some are in their military base in Djibouti, where they are still there and monitoring the situation. And they haven't completely given up, but they are also trying to re-strategize, just like the United States is also currently trying to re-strategize and also find in other areas where they could also benefit from in the continent. And France, the United States, that's even lost its influence in the Sahel region, are currently now looking at areas such as the coastal West African. For instance, Ghana has been one of those countries, and where France has been building much more stronger cooperation with the Ghanaian government. And then Cote d'Ivoire, although there has been a bit of setback where the military had to be withdrawn and bases given to Ivorian military officials. But France continued to monitor and also keep base in terms of Ivory Coast. And similar has also been happening in other areas as well within West Africa. So France haven't lost full interest. They still have interest, but they are now trying to reevaluate and also look for other means of cooperation within West Africa. And largely, this kind of cooperation, as we know, the proximity of these countries to Europe, it is very, very, very significant comparing and an insecurity West African Sahel could also have an impact on in Europe because these groups are very dangerous and also strategic in terms of their ways, and they can easily form an attack in any country in Europe.
What about China? I mean, I know that China's, is less involved in security matters, but aren't they afraid that their infrastructure investments and contacts in the region could be affected by the jihadist surge?
Aren't they afraid? I don't think so. And as we know, um, unlike Western partners that always have these democratic ideologies,
Mm-hmm.
these human rights, democracy, and then gender, then rights of children, and all others, all these ideologies, China is actually moving for straight business on the continent. And as they come in, they go straight into their Belt and Road Initiative that they are more focused on partnership and then building infrastructure for the various countries that they have various partnership with. And so China is not seeing it as a threat because they don't actually they are just looking for a win-win situation between the various governments on the continent and also the Chinese government and also all Chinese businesses that are here. And in most instances, as you are unable to meet those demands, there are other consequences that the government would have to pay. And sometimes some collaterals and then some agreements are not known in terms of the agreement that have been signed by various governments and then the Chinese government in terms of the infrastructure agreement that have been signed. And so Chinese, despite they've been quite worried in terms of the security issues, they are going for a win-win kind of investment in the region.
But what happens if their infrastructure projects are blown up by terrorists? Aren't they afraid of the impact of this destabilization on their business?
Yes. For instance, there's this big project from Niger, from the Agadez area through to Benin. That was a gas pipeline
Mm-hmm.
that a Chinese investment has been, and it has also faced a bit of setbacks. It is quite worrying for the Chinese government when these issues happen. But in most instances, they are looking for means and ways to get a common understanding with these government officials for the protections of their businesses. And they are worried, but they are also in for the win-win and investment that they are doing on the continent.
Hmm. Uh, So, has the increased Russian security presence had any measurable impact on the frequency and severity of jihadist attacks in the Sahel?
Has the
Um, Increased Russian security presence has it had any measurable impact on the frequency and severity of the jihadist attacks in the region?
yes, by and large, just basically based on their focus, and aside the gap that has been they are filling, aside the gap they are filling, or that has been created by the West, the they have other struggles that they also face, especially in the northern territories where they are being faced with these jihadist groups. They have a lot of setbacks that they do face as they operate. So there are a lot of setbacks because we have heard about reports where a lot of um, um, uh, private forces or private mercenaries in those areas that have been killed by these groups, and so it is quite worrying for them to that extent. But the Russian focus has largely been on regime protection, minerals, agreements, and also on other things that benefit them largely rather than the overall protection or the stabilization of the whole Sahel or West African region.
Besides the Russians, are there any other private military contractors, and to what extent they play a role in either undermining or supporting state security capacities?
Yes. Aside the Russian, we have other mercenary groups as well in Africa. As to their level of activeness is not quite well known, but we have some mercenaries from the United States and also some mercenaries from Germany. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, that are also on the continent as well. And most of these private security are likely being invited by these states to come and then provide some training and also some support to their various governments. And likely, most usually they come to assist this government in terms of providing security for them, but their activities have sometimes been much more questionable.
So recently, we heard that the United States is, proposing providing counterterrorism support and economic support to Mali in exchange for minerals. How do you assess the likely outcomes of this effort? Do you think that that is something that will work out?
Yes, the United States, despite they facing some setback in the Sahel, considering they been ousted, and then meet from the Sahel, in just recent past, around 2013, 2023, sorry, around 2023, 2024, as they faced setbacks when the new military junta came into office, where they were asked to leave the air base in Niger and for other new partners such as Russia to come in. In fact, they even clashed in one of those instances at the time. And despite these setbacks, that the US is facing, the US currently under Donald Trump is looking and re-strategizing its operations in Africa in general, and now looking for a win-win kind of cooperation, and also looking for new partners in terms of business, as we could see in the recent mini US Africa summit that happened, where a very few African countries were invited. Sierra Leone, no, sorry, Liberia, uh, uh, Gabon, Gabon leaders, and also Guinea, Senegal. All these leaders were invited to the United States for this engagement. And considering the fact that Gabon, as a country, just returned to democracy in recently, you know, it basically means that the US might not be focusing on initial ideologies such as democracy completely, but now looking for some deals and some businesses that would benefit the United States and its citizens.
But but from Mali's perspective, given that they're backed by the Russians, Would they
Yes,
be able
yes.
to agree to that? Would they be even in a position to accept such an arrangement?
Um, for now, um, based on the anti-West sentiment that is
Mhm,
springing up in these three countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, uh, aligning completely with the United States. For me personally, I don't see it happening fully
mhm.
very soon, because basically, if it happens, it means that they are now departing from their own initial campaigns as they campaigned against the West, because they indicated that the West could not help them in fighting this. But in terms of other engagement or other opportunities, they might go in to work with the United States, which is very possible to that extent, where we would now be having these minerals deals. Initially, the Burkina Faso president indicated that the United States wanted to invite them to the United States, but they indicated that they should come to their continent and make it open for them to have some discussions, rather than they going to Burkina Faso. And similar, and what just happened in Mali in recent times, where Mali Minister of Foreign Affairs met with other officials from the United States and engaging, having businesses. These partnerships are possible, but to what extent? Because looking at the security of businesses, and a lot of US businesses have seen how gold and other minerals have been seized from other investors in those countries, because this is a military regime. The government can just decide to take some actions at any moment, and it is sometimes unpredictable for this. And that's why if Mali and the United States should go into an agreement, it will now be up to how to convince these investors from the United States to go invest huge sums of money in areas that they are not too sure about what happens next.
Is there, so what would you say that the fact that there is competition for mineral resources in the area, how does it is it exacerbating insecurity in the region? The fact that there are all these foreign powers looking to grab what they can. How does it affect the security of the region, the safety, the local issues?
Uh, yes, the competition of Africa, or sometimes what I describe as the scramble for Africa in this modern era, has been largely not only because of the minerals, but also because of diplomatic strength, where countries are now looking to align with other countries to enable them look much more stronger, and also be able to make influence in terms of key global decisions that are happening as the world is now moving to a multi power dimensions, where we now have a lot of global powers playing. Now we have various stakeholders coming in. So every country, even including India, Turkey, and other emerging countries, are also trying to look for alignment in on the continent to also get to express, or kind of show their strength, you know, in terms of how they are also able to align with other people. So aside the minerals, a lot of alignment has also been taken largely, and also with regards to the BRICS, where countries are also partnering. We also have the non-aligned movement that
Mm-hmm.
has been dormant for some time, and also been revived, where a lot of African countries are not looking at even aligning with either the West or the East, but are now looking at championing their own cause, and also having some strategic um, cooperations and agreement with either the West or the East to provide development for their citizens. And so those are most of the things that are currently at play in recent geopolitical times. And so minerals is also one, especially in the context of the United States. They need a lot of lithium, a lot of gold as well in their country for making batteries and also other electronic gadgets. So it is very, very important for them. But to say that has been the sole aim for the current trend is not possible. But there are other interests that are also at play. Aside the minerals, there are also areas of looking at superpower and alignment that would also be part of as a team to enable them to navigate the geopolitical space.
So, to what extent are the jihadist groups able to exploit all these very different actors who are competing for influence, for minerals, for energy, for presence in the region?
Yeah, these jihadist groups are very strategic. And due to their strategic and their well planned, sometimes well executed ways of attacks, usually they plan, they come, they attack. And even in most instances, those being attacked or those being kidnapped are usually foreigners, where they kidnap them for ransom to enable them get good money. So they find other means to be able to navigate through the system, aside getting recruitment, aside getting and ransom being paid to them, also aside seizing even some government institutions or government roads. For instance, the border post attack, they were able to navigate their ways to kill these 50 soldiers and also pick out those their weapons and all that, and all those things usually help them to continue to navigate. They also find other ways to raise revenues as well in those areas.
So we also know that Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, they all departed from ECOWAS, and at one point there was even they were almost on the brink of a regional war. Then ECOWAS backed away, even tried to cooperate to resume some forms of cooperation. Where are they now in terms of that relationship, and how has this breakdown influenced external partnerships and also security responses in the region?
Yeah, with the emergence of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, it has been also one of the key issues that ECOWAS has been facing since they threatened to intervene militarily in Niger, and this group came up with this organization to protect and defend themselves against any external force or against the ECOWAS intervention that the ECOWAS was planning at the time of the coup that they happened in Niger. And so, due to this security bond, they are looking at expanding or creating their own block where they can be able to navigate the global system because of the gap, trying to fill that gap that ECOWAS would have. And this gap is influencing or it has been quite detrimental to ECOWAS. ECOWAS has in recent past appointed Senegal's president and to be a shuttle diplomat to try to see if he could convince these groups to manage and navigate and come back to join the bloc, and they even give them some extensions. However, this group has been quite reluctant. In fact, the Ghana's president, who in recent times assumed power in January 2025, also established the Sahel Bureau that is now trying to liaise between Ghana and also the side, try to coordinate in terms of these three countries because they've left the ECOWAS, and what happens in AEC basically have a ripple effect on ECOWAS. And these issues are very complicated, but several actions have been taken to try to convince them to come back to ECOWAS. But one important thing that happened early this year was when they gave a hint that if they could even return to ECOWAS very soon, possibly they are likely to join the bloc as a bloc, as the Alliance of Sahel States, rather than individual countries, just to enable them to be quite stronger to continue to navigate through the system. So their activities has also created a vacuum because initially these countries were cooperating with uh, um, institutions such as the Accra Initiative that was also initiated to enhance security sharing between the Sahel countries as well as the coastal communities for them to share information to prevent the spread of these groups. And so after they have left these bodies, a lot of gaps has been created, and information hasn't been that fluent, or that hasn't been flowing much more in the Accra initiative in terms of how they'll be able to combat terrorism and in the region. So this has created gaps in the region for these countries for these groups Jenim to be able to navigate. In fact, if these countries are unable to coordinate and cooperate and obviously share military tools, it becomes much more easier for the uh, jihad to be able to spread much more, especially coming to coastal West Africa.
What about local ethnic grievances among, including among the Fulani and Tuareg communities? How are they influencing Jinim's recruitment and narratives? Is this still an issue? Have these sectarian tensions been in any way handled or resolved?
Yes. Currently, it is still a major issue here on the continent, basically because of the arms, the small arms that and light weapons, small arms and light weapons that has been in the hands of individuals. There has been a lot of ethnic conflict, which has been happening, in fact, across Africa. And most of these groups find a way um, to also use that means to also exploit or cause their attacks against other institutions. So the small arms and light weapons in the hands of individuals and also in the hands of these terrorist groups has also not been helping a lot, has not been helping at all, in fact, in the fight. And so ethnic violence, and most of the time are being driven by these small arms, as local people have this. Most of the time they have been driven, and also a chieftaincy dispute. They all continue to be in existence across the continent, and jihadist groups are also trying to find ways and means to enable them to benefit from these attacks.
Be normally charged with trying to kind of handle these, internal sectarian tensions. Would that be the government? That be the community leaders, village elders, some religious or authorities, or some, civil society groups? Who is supposed to be managing these relationships?
Relationship, kindly come again with your question.
Between these communities that are at odds with each other and who are being, exploited for recruitment and so forth.
Yeah. So, just like I indicated about how these jihadist group operate, they come with sometimes they come with a solution to a particular community. Maybe they have been abandoned, or they haven't received much more development from the government, or there's this particular conflict that is happening, and then the government hasn't given keen attention to do those kinds of violence that are happening. And so they go into one side to indicate their support and also trying to provide for them. And some even go as much as just giving them a well or a borehole, and then be able to, because that is the needs of the people. And after that, they are able to get their way through to control a lot of activities in those deeper villages or communities that are at stake. And so they have different means and ways that they pass through um, to get access to the 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 community.
Really, there's still a lot of work to be done, but it doesn't sound like anyone has any clear solutions. Meanwhile, would you say that the increasing involvement of Russia and China can sideline regional African-led peace and security initiatives? How has the African Union, for instance, been reacting to all this? Do you think they're being displaced by these foreign initiatives?
Yes, and that is why it is very important for external actors and even countries within the African continent to understand that Western or external actors are largely not going to be able to help in terms of the fight against these external actors and these jihadist groups, but the solutions lies within, and they need to partner with key stakeholders, even including the African Union and
Mm-hmm.
also ECOWAS and other international bodies within the African continent to enable them fight against these groups. But external actors alone may not be able to find a lasting solution to this crisis. And then cooperation and then the political way to even effectively um, combat insecurity is something that needs to be at play. And also, the African Union, as they haven't been so much been able to provide the kind of solution that Africans would have wanted in terms of the kind of security and insecurity that are happening. It is still commendable to see that African Union, through its various agencies, are also making efforts. But due to other challenges, including financial as well as other issues such as cooperation issues and some disagreement that has been at play. And so it is still, they are still working and partnering with other stakeholders through various initiatives within Africa and also even outside Africa as they partner to find or come out with solutions for the African continent.
Would you say that the recent military coups and the rise of the junta structures among the various countries, uh, to what extent has that affected the national and regional efforts to counter violent extremism and extremist ideologies?
Yes. So the insecurity that is happening largely is concerning, like I indicated, and it affects or it has an impact in terms of the global fight because of various external actors who are on the continent or in Africa and trying to align or trying to find solutions, you know,
Mm-hmm.
on their own without involving, where there has been a lot of division and within the countries itself, where countries are not in good times with one another. So because of their alignment or their partner countries, so we saw what happened between Ghana and Burkina Faso in previous years, where the Ghanaian president indicated that there were some Russian forces in the northern borders of Ghana, and the Burkinabe leaders didn't take it lightly because as you align with other external actors, you need to be very careful in navigating the local systems to
Mm-hmm.
maintain that solid relationship to enable you to fight this counterterrorism. And without cooperation, without a mutual agreement, and then collaborative effort, it will be difficult for these African countries to come together to fight and then counter against terrorism in the country. And that is why I made mention about the Accra Initiative, which is one of the bodies that was supposed to facilitate cooperation and then intelligence and knowledge sharing between countries in the Sahel and also in some countries that are also in the west, in the coast, to facilitate information to enable them fight against. But that being said, a lot of activities or a lot of effort has also been made by various governments individually. For instance, when you come to Ghana, there has been this project known as the See Something, Say Something, where citizens are supposed to report whatever they see to state officials through a toll-free number. And similar has been replicated in Nigeria as well. Burkina Faso has also been made a lot of effort. But by and large, despite these initiatives, there are supposed to be some local solutions that is looking at aside the militarization of the fight against counterterrorism. We need to be looking at the root cause of this before someone goes to even join a jihad group, an Islamist group, goes to join any group at all to cause a mayhem. The person is not having work. So the creation of job opportunities for the citizens is very important in terms of us being able to counter or fight this, which is very important. Aside jobs, there need to be a lot of education and training for individuals and also citizens at large, for them to understand the various impacts for themselves, even their families, and also the future of various states in which they live. So it is important to educate and also to get those young ones who are outside and they don't have any skills or education or training to also go into the various institutions to also get learning and also skills that they could be able to make living out of it. So it's important for us to, as we are looking at the normal militarization in the fight of this counterterrorism aspect, we also need to look at the key basics issues that are also driving these key problems that we face in recent times.
Have any African countries taken a leadership role on that front, trying to assist some of these communities or countries that are failing in that regard? Or is that still a major struggle? Are there countries just too different from across the continent to be able to kind of assist one another in that way?
Yeah, there has been a lot of project that has even been championed by the ECOWAS community, for that of West Africa, even for EAC, East African Community, and even largely the African Union, to provide some skills, some training for young people. But looking at the rate of unemployment in the country, it is very, very worrying. And as a population of over 1 billion people, and majority close to about 600,000 people are young people. It is who, and most of them are not either in a active education or even in any work. It is important for all governments to build that. But we all understand the economic issues and then the crisis that various African countries are playing. Despite jobs being created, it hasn't been able to close that gap that we have in terms of the job market. So there need to be much more expanded project, and that is why it is important for collaboration, not only within the African continent, but even collaboration with other external countries who are having aged groups or aged population to also come in to be able to tap through the young talent that Africa has, for them to also help in building their economies as well.
Would you say the fact that there's been so much failure in that regard affected the legitimacy of these institutions, organizations like ECOWAS, or even the local governments, including the ones that promised all these changes and blamed the West for that, and then haven't been able to deliver anything that addressed these issues?
Yeah, by and large, these institutions has faced a lot of issues within the continent, aside there are the normal issues of finance, financial challenges, and because most of the condemnation that has risen so far has been that the African Union or Africans are not able to even fund their own budgets, and most of their budget are being funded by the Europeans, and in return they have a representative in the African Parliament where Africans do not have similar same in Europe. So it has been a lot of debate, and as people continue to share their experiences in that regard. But the fundamental thing is that the institutions have their own challenges that they also face, and based on what they can do, they have been implementing, but it hasn't been to the expectations of the ordinary people. And so institutions such as the African Union and even the ECOWAS need to sit up and also to be able to do more and then find up some solutions that actually tackles the real solutions of the continent and try to manage their own business rather than leaving it for external actors to run and then control these institutions, because as those external actors provide funding for your budget, by and large, they would always have a say as to some of the projects and some of the things that you would want to execute. And so it is important for these leaders to try and look for means and ways to contribute. And it is also important for African countries, especially particularly in the ECOWAS, for them to contribute their quota to the ECOWAS community to enable them have their own funds rather than depending on the West for this funding to run their businesses. And with this, I believe that the control, Western control on this regional body would be limited, and Africans will be able to manage their own affairs in terms of what the citizens want. Because largely, Western sentiment is not only in the Sahel areas, but it has quietly been slowly been penetrating into coastal communities and even other countries as well.
What we're seeing is that countries like Russia, they're not just simply propping up regimes, but they're also investing for their own interest into infrastructure and nuclear agreements and building nuclear reactors in different parts of the continent. Does that mean that they're essentially stuck there forever? That they will, because they're basically creating mechanisms to perpetuate their own influence, and I don't see any way of getting them displaced once they come to these long-term major investments. Do you see any hope in essentially getting them out once they embark on something like that?
Well, getting them out, I think currently there has been a lot of scramble for the continent, and
Mm-hmm.
people or countries are looking for key partners. And so it depends on what Russia is bringing on board and what the West is bringing on board. So if what the Russians are bringing on board actually aligns with what the citizens of a particular country are interested in, largely they would go for that. And that is why this revival of the non-aligned movement is very key, as Africans are now going to be focusing solely on what it interests, what is in
Mm-hmm.
its interest, and not what is in the interest of other external actor. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, it is important that any partnership agreement that is coming should always go in favor of the country that are going to sign these agreements. And most African countries are looking towards that direction rather than aligning to a particular country where they despises the other emerging actor as they come in with key. So Russia has been thriving, and they have been signing a lot of partnerships with African countries based on their needs and then their demands. And if the West are also coming onto the continent, they would also have to present some policies and then some deals or agreements that are in the interest of both sides.
Would you say that as a result of these shifting alliances, there are some new mechanisms for intelligence sharing or joint operations emerging in the Sahel, in the coastal countries, or with external partners?
Um, for the three countries in the Sahel, the alliance of Sahelian states, they have been trying to cooperate even aside economic. They have been trying to cooperate security-wise in terms of providing their own security. And also there has been called for the revival of the ECOWAS standby force, the force that will enable the ECOWAS community to fight against any attack or any threat that comes into its borders. So these discussions are still on the ground moving to be able to enable these bodies to find solutions to the security challenges that we face here on the continent.
So, given what has happened, what lessons can be drawn from the previous Western-led interventions against jihadists? And what do you think should be done differently in the future by whoever wants to be successful?
Well, just like I indicated, that the fight against these groups started decades ago, and
Mm-hmm,
it is important that as any actor that comes on the continent know that cooperation is very key in terms of the fight, and it is not always military wise, and because as you come in, you don't know when you are leaving, and so
mm-hmm,
it is very important for you to make sure that the benefits are usually a win-win win between you and also the country that you are partnering. And so any actor, for instance, there are several factors considering the West with their ideologies that you will need to meet before you can be able to even get an investment or get um, some partnership with. You need to meet some criteria like democracy. You also need to meet some, but the trend is currently changing. Like I
mm-hmm,
indicated in Gabon, that recently had a military leader becoming the president, and with over 90% of the votes, which are quite questionable in terms of a much more stronger democracy, these things are not likely to happen. And having the United States president calling him to a US African summit, then these things basically means that the most of the external actors are now looking for a win-win, but
mm-hmm,
not an ideology. But it is very important for external actors to know that the win-win is what goes on, because in recent times Africans are neither looking for going west or east, but they are looking forward, and each country coupled with the various challenges and then the anti-west sentiments that are rising, they need to come together to find a win-win cooperation for both countries, because no external actor will be allowed again to exploit. Even if they are allowed by the leaders, the citizens would rise against them and they would be forced to leave the continent.
Finally, regarding response to the violence, what would you say are the most urgent priorities for whether African or international stakeholders who are seeking to contain or reverse the spiral of jihadist movements in the Sahel? What should be the most immediate response, in your opinion?
Yes, there are several um, responses that should be. But to me, I think it is very important for key corporations for between the West or the East and then Africa. So it is crucial for various government, international actors to also support the initiatives, especially in terms of areas um, that that affect the world at large. So investment in terms of research areas, in terms of small arms, transnational crimes, and also other issues that are dealing with weapons, and these findings should also be sent to the people on the ground to know the influence, to also influence policy and also discussions. But that being said, I think that African countries need to begin to understand that together as Africa, the stronger we are. And so African countries must begin to coordinate, cooperate their own activities and build through various initiatives, even including this, the AFTA, so African countries will need to collaborate much more stronger for their own interest. First, you need to trade among yourselves first before you can even trade with other external forces. So African countries must find ways to cooperate, either economically, even politically, to become a very much more stronger force in the geopolitical space. And also, the security of African countries also contribute to global security, investment into the ECOWAS conventions, and also other conventions that seeks to promote peace and security on the continent are key. And so we should be looking at that. And also, if external actors need to cooperate with African, they should coordinate with various governments to try and find the background solutions to these issues, which I made mention earlier, which is helping in finding the jobs, establishing institutions, industries, that are workable within the continent that can be able to employ these young ones. Private public partnership are also very key in terms of this regards to enable us fight against extremists. If a lot of the young people are employed, we'll be able to mitigate this impact of terrorism on the continent. And so, yes, there should also be other investment in other key sectors as well. I've been mentioning about the Accra Initiative, which is very, very important. So a lot of investment, a lot of coordination, even with Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger that has left the ECOWAS bloc. It is still important for various countries that are within this initiative to cooperate and then share ideas to enable countries tout future plans by the jihadist group within the region as well. So it is important for that. So yeah.
So I think it's very obvious that prevention is just as much a key as reaction. I think I think what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that people like Donald Trump who on the one hand understand this concept of mutual interest, but on the other hand also believe that organizations that have provided assorted forms of relief or training or projects were a waste of money, they're kind of getting it wrong. They're looking at it, as an expenditure rather than as an investment into local security, as a prophylactic measure that protects against greater spending on security later. And I think that's the message I hope that everyone watching this program will take away. At the end of the day, security matters to everyone. It has a global impact, and preventing it and rooting out major problems at the root before it metastasizes and affects beyond and spreads wider and wider is essential. It's a global health security measure. It's not just it's not just it's not a waste of money. It's on the contrary, you could get a good return on what you're putting in. And I really hope this message comes across, because right now the conversation about West Africa is mired in circles of confusion, which I think is not necessary. I think a lot of the anti-Western sentiment and disillusionment is being also fed by indifference and misunderstandings and lack of engagement. And I think messaging matters, engagement matters, and being able to have conversations and address past problems and past mistakes also is a key towards better policies and better outcomes. And I think this is what I'm hearing from everything you said today, and those are important takeaways, in my opinion, and they're constructive.
Yes, very constructive, and they're also very important that we take all this as we look at the win-win situations. It's also very important that we look at the cooperation and also how we can engage to get a mutual understanding to maintaining the peace. But it is better to prevent the situation than allowing it to escalate before you look for solutions in this regard.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for providing these invaluable insights for those watching. Thank you for so much for taking the time to listen to these important insights. We'll be back next week, Tuesday night, as always, 9 p.m. And for everyone who was able to tune in today, thanks again and have a great evening. Thank you so much again for your time.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.